Friends, we have now reached a turning point in world history, something that until a few weeks ago also could not have been predicted. Trump's political future is in danger. That is, Trump is, in his own language, fired.
Hey Trump, you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
But it's not just that. US hegemony is in danger. Globalization is in danger. And possibly the world order, especially its nuclear order, is now going to be upset. That is, we are now in a unique situation that the world's most powerful country, by far, that is the US, is now no longer able to control the sea lanes of communication on which globalization, world trade, and our economic prosperity depends. Trump has cornered himself into a situation where now no good options exist for him, and that is for the US. That is because now Iran firmly controls the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not going to leave that chokehold because it knows that it's now its only real leverage, control, or rather stop American and Israeli bombings. And for it to recover, it needs the income that comes from tolling what's now called the Tehran toll booth, that is the Hormuz choke point. Trump is now faced with three options, all of which are bad not only for him, but for the existing global order that we have been so used to over the last many decades. His first and best option is to strike a deal with the Iranians, which will inevitably leave them in control of Hormuz, but it will prevent a further escalation of this war. It will prevent a further breakdown of oil and gas infrastructure and will allow the price of oil and gas to return to an affordable range within a few months. It will also ensure that whatever is left of Iran's infrastructure and much of the GCC Gulf countries' infrastructure will survive. The second and the third options that Trump has will not ensure any of these. The second option that he has is of introducing ground troops, either in those Persian Gulf islands which Iran controls, or on the Iranian mainland or coastlines. But that would have disastrous consequences because as the US escalates in that direction, Iranians are most likely going to fire drones and missiles at the GCC countries' oil and gas infrastructure, their power plants. And this will inevitably send oil well above $150 per barrel, possibly even above $200 or $250 per barrel. This will lead to a global economic depression and will still leave Hormuz in the hands of the Iranians. His third option is to do a carpet bombing of Iran's infrastructure. This is in a way already started. That is, in a gradual way, the United States has begun to bomb Iran's bridges, universities, steel plants, power plants, pharmaceutical and vaccine production factories, its schools, its water plants, and its historical sites. But as Trump said in his address to the nation, that we will send them back into the Stone Age. That means this could be greatly escalated, to which the Iranians would respond again by bombarding both Israel's water treatment and power plants, but more importantly, GCC countries' water treatment, power plants, and definitely their oil and gas refineries, oil fields, oil and gas terminals. But even if all of Iran's infrastructure is destroyed, the Iranians are not going to back down for two reasons. Firstly, they want sufficient pain to be inflicted on the US and Israel. This could be in the form of oil prices, domestic political loss for the leaders of the two countries, and possibly economic recession, even an economic depression. They don't want to enter a situation like that of Gaza or Lebanon, where repeatedly the Israelis will violate ceasefires, keep attacking. They call it mowing the lawn. So Iran does not want to be in that situation where the regime will inevitably collapse if after every few months they are either decapitated or their infrastructure is attacked. Moreover, the new leadership of Iran is more hardline than the previous one. That is, now Iran is firmly in the control of the IRGC, which is the Praetorian Guard of the Iranian Islamic regime. It is no longer totally in the control of clerics and civilian politicians, which it was earlier. That is, Ayatollah Khamenei was relatively a moderate. So was his chief commander, that is Larijani. They were pragmatists who were willing to do deals. They were also cautious, and that is why Iran had responded quite moderately to previous attacks. But the new leadership has decided that that was a wrong and failed strategy, that they should have been more aggressive from the beginning. And now their only chance of survival is to bring the house down and keep attacking until the Americans and the Israelis come to some kind of an end of conflict. They want an end of all hostilities, not a temporary ceasefire. That is, if Trump does not exercise option 1 and comes to a deal with the Iranians now, the other option 2 and 3 will be very painful for both the GCC countries as well as for the world economy, because oil prices will be out of control not just for a few weeks or months, but possibly for years if all of this oil and gas infrastructure is destroyed. But whether there is a deal or no deal, American hegemony is now in deep trouble. That is, the sea lanes of communication and the supply chains on which modern globalization depends could now be threatened by other countries or even groups such as Houthis or the Yemeni government or the Somali pirates and a lot of small countries which depend upon globalization and free flow of goods and commodities like oil, iron, etc. That is, countries in the GCC, small countries in Africa, in Latin America, especially in Southeast Asia and East Asia, big exporting countries, even in Europe, will now no longer be able to depend on American security, on global sea lanes of communication. And all of this has happened because of Trump's corruption. That is because he's taken funding from so many pro-Israeli Zionist groups in the US, because of his arrogance in deciding that he knows everything and he knows best. In fact, the poor advice that he has received from his unqualified advisors is also a reflection of his arrogance, where he put in power people like Stephen Miller as in the White House, who is an extremist and believes in unrestrained US hegemony and power, or the Defense Secretary Hegseth, who is deeply unqualified. As you can see, he's fired a number of generals. Just today, he has fired the Chief of Army Staff in the US, and before that, he has fired many more generals. Trump, and with the help of Elon Musk's Doge and Marco Rubio in the State Department, has fired a lot of the staff that could have rightly advised the president. That is, there is an intergovernmental agency process in which there are people in the intelligence organizations such as the NSA, the CIA, etc. There are people in the State Department, that is in the Foreign Ministry of the United States. All of those top level advisors have been fired, either because they did not ideologically align themselves with the president government, that is, there has been a deep politicization of the policy making process, or because they wanted to save money under the false belief that all of this is excessive and unnecessary and we don't need so many experts and advisors. Plus Trump's poor judgment and greed, that is, he thought, and he had been convinced by the Israeli lobby, that Iran would be an easy target and he would get a quick win in 4 days and he would be remembered for decades or centuries for removing such a big enemy of the US. That is why he was so easily manipulated by the Israel lobby, the Zionist lobby, Netanyahu, etc. His greed made him take this decision, along with his arrogance and his corruption. But this will have long-term consequences not just for Trump's political career, but also for the Republican Party and for America's hegemony. And as I had explained, for the world economy, including the economies of many smaller countries, especially the poor countries which are highly dependent on fertilizers, food grains, etc. America, because of its huge GDP, over $31 trillion, its massive defense expenditure, will slowly recover, but it will take many years and at the cost of many lives, especially in the third world countries. Moreover, by repeatedly insulting his NATO allies, Trump is also giving the wrong signals, both to his allies, who no longer now trust him, and also to the enemies, that is to Russia and China, that NATO is no longer powerful and no longer a credible defense bulwark. And this would cost the United States also, because it's not just NATO which needs the US. The US also needs its allies. It's also sending the wrong signal to its allies in East Asia that they are not important, because they have taken away many of the defensive missile systems such as Patriot and THAAD from East Asia and put them in the Middle East, because the US was facing a shortfall of missiles. And they are also seeing his behavior both towards them and towards the European allies. So he's weakening America's global hegemony, which was to a large extent through its allies. American power, of course, mattered, but what multiplied that power was the power of its economically productive and militarily powerful smaller allies. In fact, what is now coming into question is the reliability of America's nuclear umbrella. Just as America's conventional military may not come to their aid, they now fear America may not help them with its nuclear shield, and therefore there is now a lot of talk going on in South Korea, more quiet talk going on in Japan, and in smaller European countries also, such as Poland, Germany, maybe it's time to look at their own nuclear deterrent. The world has also now seen that how nuclear powers utilize their nuclear shield to keep conventionally attacking smaller countries. They've seen that in the past, what happened with Libya, Muammar Gaddafi's, or Iraq, Saddam Hussein's, or the way Putin's Russia attacked Ukraine. And they've seen how America dare not attack North Korea because of its nuclear weapons. And it may take only so many liberties with, say, a China or a Russia. Thus, many countries in the world may make a dash for nuclear weapons. Apart from South Korea or Japan or Poland or Germany, this could include countries such as Turkey or even Saudi Arabia, because they are in a neighborhood where there is a very powerful nuclear armed country with an assured second strike capacity. I'm talking about Israel. It not just has nuclear weapons, but it has a nuclear triad. That is, its Dolphin class submarines, which Germany gave it, have torpedo tubes which can fire nuclear cruise missiles. Maybe even some countries further afield, like South Africa or Brazil, can now start thinking about nuclear weapons. As I had explained in my earlier video about the third nuclear age, we definitely have entered this dangerous terrain where there may be conventional peace due to nuclear deterrence, but there can always be accidents. There was a study which had been done for India and Pakistan that if they have a nuclear war, tens, possibly even hundreds of millions of people could die immediately in the explosions, and over the next couple of years, more than 2 billion people, that's a quarter of the world's population, could pass because of the nuclear winter. Because the nuclear winter will have impact on agricultural production, food production globally. If two large countries like the United States and Russia would go to war, this could result in over 200 million people dying in the explosions. And as much as 3/4 of the world's population, that's up to 6 billion people, would die over the next few years due to the nuclear winter. That is the explosive material which is sent up into the higher atmosphere, that is dust and chaff, etc., would block out the sun for a period of a few years. This would not only have a radiation effect on people who survive, but also on the plants and animals. That means agriculture production would plummet. Thus, Trump's behavior would have an impact not just on his own political career, but as I've explained, on the Republican Party, on American hegemony, on the global order. And moreover, Iran could lead to more global resistance against US hegemony. Iran's resistance would not be the same as that of Iraq after the Iraq invasion of 2003 or Afghanistan's during the 20-year period. That is, their resistance had localized impacts. But Iran's resistance and blocking of the Hormuz, and possibly if the Houthis enter, then blocking of the Red Sea also at Bab al-Mandab, could lead to global resistance in many parts of the world, and finally a change in the global order, at least for a time period, until America and the other countries realize the losses that have happened and get their act together But the world which will be reconstituted or recreated after this will not be the same as the old world. In the words of the Italian political scientist Antonio Gramsci, the old world order has ended and the new one is yet to be born. And in the interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. By morbid symptoms, he is referring to political, strategic, and military crises. So keep watching, and if you find my content worthwhile, please like my videos, share what you can, short or long videos in your social friend circles. And until next time, Daswadanya.